welcome to another of our Buffalo Philharmonic Classics concerts. I'm so glad that I have the chance to tell you a little bit about the music you're going to hear before our wonderful musicians perform it for you. Today we're starting with the great treasure of the Baroque period, one of Bach's Brandenburg Concertos. These are extraordinary pieces, Bach's collection of 6 glowing instrumental works that he presented to the Margrave of Brandenburg, Christian Ludwig. Bach was working at Cöthen at this time. He hadn't moved to Leipzig yet, and he met the Margrave during a trip to Berlin. The Margrave was a very serious collector of manuscripts, and he casually asked Bach to send him some things that he could take a look at. Now, the Margrave seemed to have immediately forgotten all about that. But Bach took this request very seriously, and in 1721, he put together 6 superb pieces that would always be called the Brandenburg Concertos. He borrowed from some previous works, he rewrote, revised, polished, and sent them as a gift, one of the most wonderful gifts anyone could ever get, to the Margrave of Brandenburg with this flowery note. In accordance with your Highness's most gracious orders, I have taken the liberty of rendering my most humble duty to your Royal Highness with the present concertos, which I have adapted to several instruments, begging your Highness most humbly not to judge their imperfection with the rigor of your discriminating and sensitive taste, but rather to take into your benign consideration the profound respect and the most humble obedience which I thus attempt to show you. Well, it appears that the Margrave never looked at this spectacular gift, or if he did, he decided that they were not worthy of him because he did not even include them in his library as he had with all the other pieces that he had been given. Bach's manuscript lay completely unnoticed for 13 years when it was sold for just a few pfennigs at the Margrave's death. It's ironic that these 6 masterpieces have won a place in history for the Margrave of Brandenburg, who paid no attention to them. One of the greatest collections of Baroque pieces ever written. We're delighted to present the 3rd Brandenburg Concerto tonight, led by our concertmaster Nicky Chewy from the 1st violin chair. Now we move on to Igor Stravinsky. And there's a reason that it's right after the Bach, because there's a fascinating connection between these 2 works. Now, Igor Stravinsky was perhaps the most influential composer of the 20th century, and he had 3 distinct artistic periods in his life. First, the great works that he based upon Russian fairy tales, ballets like Petrushka and Firebird, then a wonderful neoclassical period, and finally, towards the end of his life, his foray into 12-tone music. This piece, the Dunbarton Oaks Concerto, was written in 1937 as one of the greatest of his middle neoclassical period works. Neoclassical, well, this is a wonderful concept of composers looking back to the past for inspiration, often 2 centuries earlier, and reinventing that earlier Baroque and classical music in new garb, in bright modern colors, in contemporary rhythms, in a 20th century voice. It's wonderful music, like a handshake across the centuries. And Stravinsky loved Johann Sebastian Bach, and he often used him as a general model for his works. For the Dumbarton Oaks Concerto, he actually based the inspiration on the very first work of our concert, Bach's 3rd Brandenburg Concerto. Here are Stravinsky's own words about that inspiration. He said, I played Bach very regularly during the composition of the concerto, and I was greatly attracted to the Brandenburg Concertos. Whether or not the first theme of my first movement is a conscious borrowing from the 3rd of the Brandenburg set, however, I do not know. What I can say is that Bach would most certainly have been delighted to loan it to me. To borrow in this way was exactly the sort of thing he liked to do. The spirit of Bach is reborn in the pages of the Dunbarton Concerto. His bustling figuration, his counterpoint, his shifting from one group to the other, but in 20th century style. The piece takes its name from a magnificent federal-style home, Dumbarton Oaks, near Washington, D.C., which was the scene of many wonderful musical soirees, hosted in the great music room by the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Bliss. They actually commissioned Stravinsky to write Dumbarton Oaks Concerto to be premiered in that room on the occasion of their 30th wedding anniversary. Our final piece on the program is by Ludwig van Beethoven, his Septet, as we draw near to his 250th birthday on December 16th. We wanted to find a way to celebrate with one of his most beloved chamber pieces, his Septet for 4 strings, violin, viola, cello, and double bass, and 3 winds, clarinet, bassoon, and horn. This is an early work. It was written in 1799. Beethoven was just 29, and the work was instantly a hit. It was greatly beloved, cheerful, optimistic, and elegant. It was the type of music that was extremely popular with the aristocracy and the middle classes. Often these types of works were called serenades or divertimentos, and they served as beautiful background ambiance for dinners or teas or garden parties. Composers used them very frequently. Even Haydn and Mozart used this form often and with great artistic success. And this was Beethoven's gift to the genre. But Beethoven, after that, began to move into much more turbulent waters with his strong, fierce symphonic statements. The public continued to ask him again and again, why couldn't he write pieces like the lovely Septet again? When it became clear to Beethoven that the Septet had actually become far and away his most popular work, he became quite irritated. He was moving in another direction and he wanted people to come with him. He complained about the lack of seriousness of the Septet and even went so far as to lie to his admirers by telling them that he had actually not written the work, it had been written by Mozart. But the popularity of the Septet continued. In fact, it began to be rearranged by other composers and published in transcriptions for other instruments, from large band to string quintet to even a solo piano piece and many more. Over the years, Beethoven, who could be a bit of a curmudgeon, never quite forgave the Septet for its enormous popularity, but its only crimes were its youthful charm, its natural beauty, and its immediate appeal. It is without question the greatest Septet ever composed. I think you will love it, and you will love hearing our solo players in this beautiful work.